Okay, it's 8:30. We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
John Regheimer,
Here.
Stacy Hessel, Mark Helwig, Tom Duffy, Jeff Haney. You have a quorum.
Excellent. Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Certification of compliance, please.
This meeting was noticed to the media and the public as required by Section 19.84 of Wisconsin statutes.
Excellent, thank you. The agenda is set. Public comments. We have one public comment.
Linda Zilmer, Edgewater property owner, resident of the village of Birchwood, and Mr. Kinsley is on his way in if you didn't notice, so he should be here shortly. I so appreciate the committee getting regular reporting now on legal fees and that it's broken down by department. I am hoping that this information maybe gets shared out to each county board supervisor, and then their committees of jurisdiction can take a look at that and maybe break down some of that information further. As I look back on 2024, there were a couple of big legal items that it would probably be meaningful to understand how much money went into that. Specifically, there was drafting of a tourist rooming house licensing ordinance, and that was done with an ad hoc committee. There was also probably significant time spent on multiple versions of zoning ordinance amendments. And then there's also the regular attendance by outside counsel at zoning committee hearings. All of those, I believe, are probably substantial costs, and maybe the county supervisors would like to understand better how that's broken out. The second item with regard to financial reporting is via Zoom, the outside auditors went over one of the smaller documents, audit documents from 2023 that you were provided. That is more of a balance sheet type report. It reported a lot on fund balances and changes in fund balance, but it was not the larger audit report that was really the revenue and expenditures. Really, how did the county operate and how did it operate according to budget? So this committee only saw an overview of fund balance. The entire county board did not see either a detailed explanation of that nor have you gone over the audit report. One of the things that is coming before committees in the county board this month is the potential for getting a temporary bridge to be placed in winter. And there was discussion at a previous committee meeting about the funds would come from excess stumpage from 2024 is how I understood it. Well, does that really mean that that's that resource development fund? Is that the fund balance it's coming out of? And do you know what the fund balance was at the end of 2024? So that's just an example of things this committee might want to look into further. Thank you.
Nobody online, right? Okay. Move on. Consider approval for minutes from previous meeting.
I'll move we approve them as presented.
Motion made by Tom Duffy, second by Stacy Hessel. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, minutes approved. Thank you. Number 9, Town of Winter, request for assistance for temporary bridge. Andy, can you give us a background on that, please?
Just going to grab the screen here. So in the packet, you have the request from the Town of Winter for assistance to address a closed bridge. Up on the screen, I'm just going to pull up a couple of reference items. The bridge is located in the Town of Winter, kind of in the south central part of the county, not too far north of the county line. It's on the Thornapple Grade Road over the Thornapple River. A little bit of background on why the bridge is closed is it's not part of the bridge program, or has not been part of the bridge program as we call it, when the towns with the highway department get the bridges assessed by an engineer and they score them. Up until this last year, it was not scoring poor enough to be a part of the bridge program. and by that I mean scheduled for replacement. Well, the bridge had deteriorated enough in a fairly rapid time period where now it scores high enough. So it's going to be put into the bridge program for funding. It'll probably take 3 years at the minimum, probably closer to 5, before it can be replaced. But it's poor enough that it also cannot have any traffic on it. So that's why it's been closed. So the town was looking at options. It's a town bridge. They were looking at options of what to do because that is a lengthy closure. You know, it's not what I would say a high volume road, but it's one of the few access points to the county forest in that area. So they've requested assistance from the county. To us at the county, there's what I would say is an economic issue. One is that that's our largest county forest block. There's a lot of recreation activity that occurs there, but also we have a lot of stumpage in that area, a lot of timber sales for the county. And we've talked about this in a few committees this week, Land, Water, Public Works, and now here. And I had the Forest Administrator talk a little bit at the Land, Water meeting about the economic impact. And we anticipate, because that is the primary access point to get to those sales, in the letter it talks about, I think, a 40-mile alternative route that either will see a decline or a reduced bid price for sales in that block, or no sales at all, just because of the additional costs the loggers will have to go around. So that's why we've taken up this issue and have talked about it in a couple committees. The proposal that we put to the other committees to consider to participate with the town of Winter would be the $140,000 cost that's in the letter from the town is the total cost, the estimated total cost of putting a temporary bridge in place. Of the 140, 85,000 is the actual temporary bridge. It's a used bridge, but it's a pre-built structure that's out east in Pennsylvania. The company who built it, the cost of that is 85,000. The remaining 55,000 is the cost to transport it here and then to set the bridge. And looking how to have the county consider participating, we think the best alternative is to purchase the bridge or be a part of that acquisition. That way, when it's no longer in use for a temporary bridge here, we have that bridge available for other projects. It could be rented out for revenue to offset that expense. And also, our county forestry has pointed out that they have a number of areas within the county forest that have limited or poor access because of stream crossings or other water issues that the sales can only be accessed during freeze-up periods. And so they don't have as many bids on those sales. So they could use the temporary bridge in those cases also to access some of those forest sales. I did put the other Land, Water, Forestry Committee and Public Works both have heard this, and they both made motions to, for the county to move ahead with purchasing the bridge. Anticipating that, I did put together a resolution for the Finance Committee that I put out that basically summarizes what I just said, that we received the request for support. The bridge is closed because of unsafe conditions. It is a primary access point to the county forest and the economic activity that occurs there. We are able to participate in this type of a project. It would make it available for use for additional projects in the future, including access to forestry sales, other bridge closure replacement projects, or rental to other government units. It's $85,000 of the $140,000 cost. Source of funds, we did have an excess or surplus of forestry revenue last year of more than $500,000. We brought in over $2.5 million, and the budget amount was $1.85. So that would be the targeted source of funds. The Land, Water, Forestry Committee and Public Works both approved by motion assisting the town of Winter by purchasing the bridge. And now therefore be resolved that the Board of Supervisors approves acquiring the temporary structure to be used as a temporary bridge on the Thornapple grade until such time as a new bridge is constructed. That we amend the hang on. Think about the wrong resolution. That the board allocate $85,000 of 2024 surplus forestry revenue to the purchase of the temporary bridge. And that after the use of the temporary bridge on the Thornapple grade, the county retains ownership of the bridge for future use. I think I might have handed out the draft copy. Yeah. Yeah, I'll print out the other copy, but be it the resolve that the Suffolk County Board of Supervisors allocate $85,000 of 2024 surplus forestry revenue to the purchase of the temporary bridge.
Make a motion that we approve the resolution.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, resolution passed. Thank you. I got too much going on. I can't tell which one's which.
Yeah, but nobody signed them.
Number 10, treasurer's report. Ryan.
Good morning. Just some brief things. I'm not going to read the whole report, but the January settlement went well. We got the county collected a little over $2.2 million property taxes. We started the interim process for the 2022. We published in the paper this week. Should have went with the Gazette too. Haven't been able to verify that. And we're also starting about the interim process for the 2020 delinquent. There's 42 parcels that we're starting that process, and that'll end right around August 31st. We collected $3,600 on our Wells Fargo P cards for just reward points. We're looking to change that also. I think we're going to look at some other credit cards. And that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you. It's good to have you here. Number 11, Finance Department report. Mike.
All right, we'll start with sales tax revenue. And January was a great month, 241,000, which is about 85,000 over last year. So on target for 4 million. I'm not projecting we're going to hit 4 million, but that's just how the formula works this early on. But great news. We had lagged a little bit in November, December. So to see January start out strong is encouraging. On budget performance, I'll start with 24. And we still have some stuff to close out. We've got revenue still coming in, still paying a few bills, and then we'll be closing stuff out. We should have it pretty much wrapped out by the next finance committee meeting, and we'll have recommendations for what to do with any surplus, which we will have. Right now, if you look at it, we are at about 2.5 million, a little bit over. We have not paid out the 10% that goes to townships from the stumpage. That's about 275,000. So that'll knock that down a little bit, down to about 2.2 million. And then if you look at human services and highway, HHS is going to eat up a lot of that surplus, and highway will want to transfer probably just about the rest. So it's going to be about a break-even year at the end. HHS revenues are down a little bit, especially in Medicaid. And I know we still have some billings to go out that we'll get reimbursed for, so that'll be coming in. Other than that, our contracted services was up a little bit, well, quite a bit, about 600,000 over budget, but we were $1 million over budget on youth justice. And that was our dealing with our youth. And some of them went out of county, some were foster care, but that's something we've been working on, and the cost was up quite a bit. We have adjusted budget for 25, But the good news is we're down significantly with adult out-of-county placements too. So the net was about $600,000 deficit. So right now we are sitting at a structural deficit there of about 1.8 million. We had projected or budgeted for a transfer from the general fund of 600,000 and then pulling from HHS fund balance of about 750,000. So about 1.35 out of that 1.8 has not been adjusted yet. In the end, we'll probably be recommending taking most of that out of the general fund surplus that we have and trying to keep HHS fund balance intact for now because they're going to have some needs for 2025 as well. And it's a little concerning for me that we're on a trajectory that's not sustainable in HHS. So we are beginning some meetings to look at what we can possibly do to increase revenue or decrease expenses a little bit. Highway right now, we're showing a loss of about 50,000. Really, really close to budget, but depreciation hasn't been booked yet either. So that is going to increase expenses a little bit. And as I mentioned, we'll probably have to do a transfer to highway as well from any surplus from the general fund. Any questions on 2024?
Could you reiterate the HHS again? So you're concerned with the trajectory we're on? Maybe expand on that just a little bit.
Well, before Andy and I got here, HHS was running a deficit every year, which precipitated transferring money from surplus in, I believe, 21 from the general fund, which built up their fund balance. And then actually in 2022, they ended up, I think, with a $500,000 surplus in their own income statement. So then they added a little more to fund balance. 23 was about a break even, 71,000 surplus. Well, for 24, we budgeted a deficit, and 25 even a greater deficit. But even beyond the budget deficit for 24, we were down some in revenue, and also expenses were up some with that youth justice.
So in simple terms, what we're funding, they're just spending more than what we're have
Correct.
funded. So our choices in the future would be to increase funding or decrease services.
Or we can consider a fund balance draw from general fund to cover it.
Yeah.
Like, we need to look at all three.
The expenses that were large, very much over budget in 24 were the youth justice. So going back, I don't know, probably 5-6 years, the county was in a difficult spot because of adult placement costs, people being placed into Mendota, Winnebago, or court-ordered placements. Last year it was youth. We had not budgeted hardly anything because historically there had not been youth being placed out of county. Last year, and still right now, we have a couple of youth at Lincoln Hills, some at Mendota, some in treatment facilities that we really don't have a choice but to pay for those. So we did adjust the budget for 25, but I think we budgeted 30,000 in 24, and we were over 1.2 million of those expenses.
Okay. Well, I don't, for my sake, we don't have to belabor the point. Just when I hear that, I think it reminds me that maybe some tough decisions coming down. Act 10 continually is under threat. And this is kind of an example of real tough decisions may need to be made down the road if that were to come fruition. And maybe this is a tough decision down the road, irrelevant of what happens to Act 10. But okay. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. So then for 2025, we're very early and we haven't booked property taxes yet for January. So right now it's showing revenues of about 4%. We should be at about 8.5 for this time of year. And if we put taxes in, we'd probably be pretty close to that. On the expense side, we're running ahead. We're at 12%, but I want to qualify that because we pay all of our outside organizations in January. All of the libraries, Senior Resource Center, Nemocoggan Transit, all of those get paid in January. So a big chunk of the money is already out the door. We're the Department 33 that all those come out of, we budgeted just under 1.4. We've already spent well over 900,000 there. So 2/3 of the money has gone out already. So I don't want to alarm anyone saying we're at 12%, we should be at 8. It's very common for this time of year because we're so far over in that one category. HHS, again, it's early and we have very, very little revenue there because a lot of that is we have to claim it and then get it. So very low revenue, and the expenses are actually running pretty well for right now, but it's still showing a deficit of 400,000. And highway, we're actually running a little bit of surplus, but again, very early, so I wouldn't want to gauge anything off of January activity. Any questions on 2025? Moving on to CIP, did have some activity in January. We purchased an ambulance response vehicle that was from 24 CIP, but we purchased it now, so the money was there. A small airport state project match. And then we're in the process of migrating all of our emails to one server. Right now we have 4 or 5, which makes it hard to both communicate and even more so, the calendars don't sync. We use Microsoft Outlook. So a lot of the things that we reserve, rooms, we're even looking at reserving cars through it. We're unable to do that with the 4 different email servers. So what we're migrating to is what's required by the state for the clerk's office. So we're all kind of moving over to that system. So that those are those expenses there. And it seems like a lot of money, but it's a huge project because we have to migrate all the history over and then leave that history available and the old emails available for about 2 years, though we don't miss anything. And then the final purchases are the TASER upgrade that was in the CIP for this year. Any questions there? It's actually nice seeing CIP money go out a little sooner, because for a couple of years there was finding stuff was hard, so it was always just a waiting game, and now we're wrapping up past years and actually spending down this year a little sooner too. Then next is the legal fees by department. It's broken down by department and then also by provider in the kind of gray box on the bottom. So you can see, and as was mentioned, we did have some higher cost items in 24, a lot of money towards zoning and HHS, and that was a lot of that was TA tourist rooming house and the zoning rewriting the code. You can see they've got some costs for open records. Those we cannot recover. We can recover staff time to produce records, not attorney time to redact information. Any questions on these?
At one point, we were keeping track of the requests, how much they were costing. Are we still doing that? I mean, besides keeping track of the legal fees, is like who's costing us the most in legal fees? Is if it's open records request or if it is doing different ordinances, things like that. Are we still keeping track of that?
That was coming through the clerk and I think provided admin, and I don't know if Liz is even aware of that, so we might have to sit down with
I
her.
can talk about next week. I can talk about next request in my report.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then moving on to the investment report. December was another good month. I will point out on the right, the rates are starting to drop and some dropped again in January. Most of them are around 4.5%. Ampersand was still over 5%, which is great. And I do want to point out that those 2 CDs now we're looking pretty smart for doing that because our CD rates are higher than the money market rate, which is why we did it. And then this is for December. In January, we did purchase another CD from Ampersand. And Actually, I think that rate was pretty comparable with what we're getting from the money markets too. So it's actually better.
Yeah.
It ended up being a little better than what was quoted, so I'm really happy with that to get a 4.75 in January. And then checking Franson 4.25, I think they're down to 3.75 now. That one's Fed funds minus 0.5. But another good month overall in interest earned, and for the year we did great. And then down at the balances, ARPA, we did receive an invoice for $100,000 from Norvado for one of the broadband projects. So now we're down to just 100,000 in ARPA, and that remaining 100,000 is another broadband project that we haven't been invoiced for yet. But the funds were committed. And then you can see the opioid money unspent and still that LATCF, which we have not touched yet. Any questions there? All right, moving on to ambulance then. I want to just jump right to the aging report. Data looks good. I know it's getting harder to see, but the current is at 36%, which is a little over last month. And the over 120 days has actually been reduced. I do want to say I just got the new report from EMSMC for January, and they've actually migrated in 3 months worth of data from LifeQuest now. So they did purchase LifeQuest, now they're combining the data with them. This is probably the last month you're going to see my manual report because the new reporting looks pretty good. And it does a lot of the stuff that I was doing. The only thing it wouldn't have are the prior year comps because we're just 1 year in. So if you still would like to see those, I can produce those. But I think for next month, I'll try just giving you the canned report and see what you think. And they've combined the aging already too, so I don't have to do this one manual anymore. So the average calls per month, we are still down from last year, but up from 2 years ago, down a lot from 2021. Volume has just changed since then. Doesn't look like it's going to ever go back to that kind of volume because we've been this way for 3 years now. The average billed per month, we're actually billing at a higher amount per month than we have in the last 3 years, which is good. The next slide shows that our collections are down from even 2 years ago. So we're not collecting that as high of a percentage right now. I always qualify that because, as I've mentioned in the past, with the new company, we get data right away. It's not complete data, and then it keeps building as we go. So the collection part is down from the actuals a little bit too. Even billing amounts somewhat. Percent collected, like I mentioned, we're down. This is probably 33% is probably the lowest since I've been here doing this reporting. So we will have to monitor that. I'm hoping it's a glitch and yet another change in billing company and we'll catch up, but that will be seen. And then the last slide on this is the dollars billed and collected per month, and you can see we're billing more per billing or per call, not per month. But now our amount collected per call is down. So something to monitor to make sure that's not a lasting trend. Where the calls are going is the next slide. Very early, it's only through half of January. It was kind of the same story we've seen. Around Hayward, it's more, and as you get out further, it's a little less. Not as many calls to winter as normal, I guess I would say. But I'm sure that'll increase. So then this is the net income in ambulance through December 31st of 24. And right now it's showing just about a break even with a profit of $27,000. Again, we haven't closed everything out, but that's where we're sitting right now. So that's in good shape. Revenue's down a little bit, expenses are down as well to offset that. Any questions there? Any final fund balance we have will go to a designated fund balance to reduce the ambulance levy in the future. Ambulance charges written off.
Are we collecting any money from LCO if we run the LCO and they are unable to pay, we're supposed to be able to collect X amount of dollars from the government, LCO government?
I don't have an answer to that. I can,
We
Look
brought that
into
up maybe a year ago.
yeah. Yes, I remember Tweed talking about that.
You could check.
You bet. All right, and then write-offs. They're down, but these are still from LifeQuest mostly, not so much the new company, and they haven't been writing stuff off yet. We had that big correction in May when we switched companies, and it's been pretty steady from that point on. You can see both by the chart and the graph there. Charges going to collections, really not a lot of activity for both November and December. The next slide. The items reversed in November are actually ones that were written off, discovered they could be potentially collected, so they went back to collections. Dispatch calls as a percent of billed runs. I did get an update on this. So what this is looking at is the percent of calls that come into dispatch for an ambulance versus a number that we actually send the ambulance out and make it a billed run. So we're tracking that just to see if we're billing ones we should, and the number that and I talked about this last month. They may get there and realize it was indigestion, not a heart attack. They don't bill that as a run. So that's kind of what we're tracking there. The trend is that the percentage keeps going down. That's what that kind of olive colored line is. It started out being pretty consistent, and then we had a drop for whatever reason when we switched billing companies the first time. The solid darker green line is that point in time when we switched billing companies the first time. Should be unrelated, but for whatever reason, we've seen quite a shift since then, because the percentage used to be right around the average, and now we're kind of all over the place. So it's just something we're tracking. I update this about quarterly. And then this is just more information on that. This is by year. So we're about the same as 2 years ago, down a little bit from last year, down from 3 years ago. The next one is virtually the same because now the 12-month running cycle is year by year. So I won't say much about that one. And then ambulance transports. We have an update on this one too. And last 2 months have gone up a little bit. I had a really good month and then it was trending down again. And the reason we track this again is the reimbursement rate for transports is very, very high. So it's a good money maker for the ambulance service as a whole. So we're trying to get more of those back. John has changed staffing and how he staffs the rigs to get more of these than we've had in the past. And he's working with the hospital too. Next is the EMSMC report itself. This one does not have complete data still, but I'll point out some of the things that we'll be looking at. The nice thing with this going forward, now that we have complete data next month, is they have some things that I either can't get or it would be very hard to get. The payments are tying more closely to the runs with their report. Mine is just, what we're billing and what we're taking in that month. It's not necessarily tied, well, it isn't tied to the run itself. So this should be a little closer to that. If you go way over to the right, it shows the net collection percent by month. And at this point, I wouldn't be alarmed at the low percent. Looks like we're really dropping and not doing as well. A lot of the, goes through insurance, goes through Medicare, Medicaid. It takes a while to pay. So those months will increase as they get 2 or 3 months out. Any questions on this first one? The next few sheets are where it gets kind of fun to look at, and that is the collections by payer. So you can, like looking at the first one, Medicare, and it looks, if you go over to the right, it looks like, well, we get a really high percentage collected. But that's off the net, and there's a big amount written off when it comes to Medicare that we don't see right off the top. Like the gross charges were 700,000 and the net is 379,000. So all of that in Medicare says we're not paying at that rate. So this is what we're going to pay. And then we collect the percentage on that. And Medicare Advantage, very similar story. Insurance, insurance will talk the rate down a little bit, but not nearly as much. The patient pay, we have a lot of charges out there and not much revenue coming in. So that's something we could take a look at and see why that is, because some of those are out there 8 months now, and we should be getting a little more than that unless they're on a payment plan of like $25 a month or something, which could be. And then there are just some government payers and facility, and facility is another one where we haven't received money yet. If you want to go down to the aging, the pie chart. So this will show the aging percent by period, 30-day period it's in, and then also what's outstanding by payer. So this will be good information moving forward too. Starting next month with complete data. And then the last one is an account receivable reconciliation report. It shows the beginning balance of what's outstanding, adds in the runs for each month, takes out what isn't allowed to come with the net charges, and then deducts the payments, deducts write-offs, and then shows an ending accounts receivable. So their report gives us probably a better picture and a more complete picture of the actual activity versus what I was able to pull from the old billing system. So I'm happy with it. And hopefully next month we'll have the full 12 months and we'll get a really good picture of where we're at.
Jerry, I have a question. I really appreciate the graphs and everything that you do to give us that full report. Do you feel it would be beneficial to do that for the agencies outside of EMS? I mean, because like we get a summary, like, oh, this is, what their deficit is, but can we deep dive a little bit into the other agencies
Yep.
to say why? Okay.
Yeah, now that we've been doing ambulance for a while, I would probably recommend going to a quarterly full report. Maybe I'd throw their report in monthly, but not really do a deep dive, and then rotate in a couple other bigger departments. All right.
That's excellent. Thanks, Mike.
You bet.
Any correspondence, reports, conferences, meetings? Any future agenda items in addition to what we just talked about there? All right. Thanks, everyone, for your time. Meeting adjourned.